Naropa University is a private liberal arts university in Boulder, Colorado. It was founded in 1974 by a Tibetan teacher, and it is named for the 11th century Indian Buddhist sage named Naropa. And if you looked at Naropa University on the web, you'll notice a compelling tagline which doesn't compare to any college tagline I have ever seen. And it says, transform yourself, transform the world. And then it asks or provokes some pretty cool questions in the mind of the reader. What will you transform yourself into at Naropa? And then it answers it. How about your truest self? And like any great college, it gives credence to the notion that when the student is ready, the master will appear. And through contemplative practice, you will learn to quiet your mind so you can see what makes you you, which helps us all to make better decisions. Which brings us to this evening's guest. She is a mental health therapist who came to this profession through quite a circuitous route. Her name is Barbara Lee Foley-Bott. And Barbara, welcome to A Climb to the Top, Stories of Transformation.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much.
It's great to have you here.
Wonderful to be here.
I stated that you are a mental health therapist, and that's what you are today, but I suspect, given my introduction to Naropa University, the audience doesn't know what you did before that. Help us understand, where'd you come from? What'd you do in your past?
So I spent the majority of my career as working in the graphic arts industry. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he started a few companies for my brothers. And when I graduated high school, one of these companies that my brothers was running, I hopped along, and there was my career. So me and my brother Joe he's still running a successful graphic arts industry, and I kind of bailed out at 46 years old because of health reasons.
We're going to get to that in just a second, but I suspect as you were working in that company through your 20s and 30s, you were married, having children?
Yes,
because
I
I happen to know your son is for all full disclosure, he's a former student of mine and my friend. You were raising kids at home.
I was, absolutely, yep.
And yet, throughout the course of that, you had mentioned that it brought you to a different place.
Yes.
And did you go from raising children and working in the graphic design business all of a sudden to becoming a 40-something-year-old undergraduate at Naropa University?
No, not at all, not at all.
Well, walk us through.
So much had happened. So when I was 46 years old, I was diagnosed with Lyme's disease, and I was pretty sick at the time, and I could no longer work. So I was at home for about 4 years or 2 years, and I was my oldest daughter was looking at colleges. So when she was out looking at colleges and I was no longer working, I thought it was the worst time of my life ever, because I was, my salary got cut, and, my brother's running this business alone, and I felt really, really lost. And when I was out looking at colleges for my daughter, I said, why don't I just apply to a local community college? I got something inside of me just churned. So that was where the seed was planted, and I just, for the heck of it, I applied to take a couple classes at my local community college. I didn't get into like math, college math. I never went to college. So I took a summer class. I got into college math, and there my journey began for college. I was 50 years old.
50-year-old college undergraduate, walking on campus when everyone else is 18 and 19, and here you are having raised 3 children. But in the midst of that, there was a health scare?
Yes. So,
talk about that, and did that relate to some of your decision making for your future? So
when I was 42 years old, I'll just jump right in. When I was 42 years old, I was addicted to Vicodin. And I checked myself into a detox, and I didn't really realize that my life was going to change. And that was the pivotal moment where my life just changed. Sober for a couple years, if we can go back to recovery later, but sober for a couple years, I got sick in recovery with Lyme's disease. thinking that my world was coming to an end. Again, it was just beginning. So I've had many deaths and rebirths throughout my lifetime. What I've come to learn when I was 42, when I came into recovery, is that there's something greater and bigger in this universe, that I had to throw out all my old beliefs, my ideas, and my patterns, and I needed to really practice a new way of life. Let's just say a new frame of living, and that began at 42. So at 46, when I thought my world was coming to the end, all my bottoms have always brought me somewhere higher than I could have ever imagined myself. And that was just the beginning. So that's kind of what took me to my first college experience.
And your first college experience led you to continue the college path. But Barbara, it is very few people who pick up from the East Coast, go to a college that most people have never heard of, that is 2,000 miles away. Yet the extraordinary thing is you didn't just go to Boulder, Colorado. You kept going west.
Yeah.
And talk about your evolution of college and what led you to the wonderful kingdom of Bhutan.
So I had some pretty heavy practices of meditation and spiritual practices through recovery, and it became the basis of my life. I had got a hold of this commencement speech of this Buddhist nun called Pema Chodron. Fail, fail again, fail never. It's a Samuel Beckett quote, and she gave a commencement speech at Naropa. At the time when I listened to this, I didn't know it was Naropa University, but she shared this with me, and it was phenomenal. Then one day I'm leaving class, and this kid came up to me, and he said to me, there's a school out west that does like wilderness therapy and does a lot of spiritual Buddhism, and it really rang true to me. This kid I never met before a day in my life. He just came up to me, shared this with me. I turned around, he was gone. Didn't know where he was. Didn't know me from Adam. A week or two later, I'm reading this book, and there's somebody sitting in a college campus, and it happened to be in Naropa. So I'm coming to the end of my career of getting my associate's degree. I decide to apply to Naropa just for a heck of it. I had applied to 5 other colleges, got in. I was ready to go somewhere else. I was planning to go to pastoral counseling. I had this whole, thing going on, and
what the heck?
I applied and I got in. So my husband said, you should go check it out, And anyway, before I went to check it out, a woman called me from the school. She was one of the psychologists, one of the teachers. And I shared my story with her about my practices and what I was doing, and just the fact of my belief system. And she said to me without any hesitation, you need to come to this school. And that was like, and later on, in hindsight, when I met with this teacher, she was one of my teachers when I was there, she said, I've never said that to anybody. So the universe continued to just drop little, tapping me on the shoulder, telling me the next thing to do. I hopped on a plane, went out there, and I knew that was where I needed to be. And
what was the course of study that related to what spoke to you at this point in your life?
So I was pretty again, I was finding who I was as a woman. I was a mother, I was a wife, I ran a business, I was a co-partner in a business for many years. And I had all these roles, and yet I was given an opportunity of like a clean slate to do something that it wasn't even like it wasn't a question or a choice. It just was the next right thing to do.
But it just felt that way, or was there something written somewhere that said, hey, follow this path?
No. It wasn't even something that I like mapped out in my mind. It was a feeling from the heart that I just knew, especially when the woman on the phone said to me, and I didn't even realize all those instances that I shared with you at the time, like the Pema Chodron fail again and the man coming up to me. That's all hindsight. Like none of that was aware at the time. All I can remember is I'm in my car driving to Colorado, pulling out of my driveway, and this feeling came over me like it was just the right thing to do. Like it was like the universe had all aligned. I have never in my life felt like that. And it was just that simple. And this all happened and transpired within like 2 weeks. I applied to the school, got accepted. I went out and visited on Thanksgiving, and like right after Christmas I left. So maybe not 2 weeks, maybe more like a month. But this all happened in a very quick time. I didn't pull the key to the last moment.
Wow. What did you study at Naropa?
So I wanted to dual major because I'm really into mysticism, and I wanted, a pastoral, if it was up to me, I would have been a Buddhist nun. Like I go to daily mass. I'm very into the religious aspect of the world, not religion as a more just as the basis of love, service, and wanting to help others. And that's really the basis of my life today. My life is no longer mine. You know, I basically, my life has now been given to God or the universe or whatever to be able to help others. What I really feel very serious that I need to work through who I am as a woman, and then I could then offer it to others. And until I do that, and believe me, through what I've been through, I've worked through a lot of my stuff, and I continue to work through my stuff. But that's the basis of like the universe to me is similar to like a mirror. So I forget the question you just asked.
The course of study must have been focused on your personal development in the service of others. That's what it sounds like.
So I basically decided to do transpersonal psychology, which basically was their course and study was a Buddhist approach. Meaning, so every day when I would go to school, we would start class with a bow. There's a ritual to everything. We learned about, we would sit and meditate every day. I mean, hours, sometimes hours at a time. We would go on retreats and meditate. The basis of were the skandhas, they were the Four Noble Truths, all the Buddhism practice of getting to learn to know who I am so that I can now share that in my practice as a mental health counselor.
You also had a certain decision to make, and I will recall my own days as an undergraduate. When I went abroad, I had a few choices. And as most, even now, it's London, or I went to Amsterdam or Tokyo, but you didn't. You went to another place for your study abroad. You went to a country, a small kingdom nestled in the Himalayas called Bhutan. And a lot in the climbing community know Bhutan, but many people who don't necessarily recognize it on a map. Tell us about what led you to that decision.
So, honestly, Naropa was my, like a home, and I was called to go to Naropa, but before going to Naropa, like the first question I said to the woman that called me back is, I want to go to Bhutan. Mm-hmm. So there was something driving me to Bhutan, I'm not really sure. Even today, I could reflect back, and when I got there, I feel like I've been there before. It was just something that I knew I needed to go to. So when I talk about going to Naropa, I talk about going to Bhutan because there's no different for me. Because Bhutan was on the table when I learned about Naropa. Once I learned about Naropa, I knew that was a 5 months thing. I just wanted to go right to Bhutan. They said I needed to come for a year first, which was wonderful. So when I decided to go to Bhutan, which was exactly a year after. And I arrived here at this place that was just magical. I was looking at when I was flying into these hills the other day. It's a tiny little place, but I was seeking a teacher. So my thought was I need to go there and find a teacher to get me closer to this path that I'm trying to find. And little did I find out that I found a teacher, and I found what I was looking for, but it wasn't anything that I thought it was going to be. It was just phenomenal.
Interesting, because one of the precepts in Buddhism is when the student is ready, the master will appear. Yeah. You are listening to A Climb to the Top, Stories of Transformation. I'm Chuck Garcia. My guest today is Barbara Lee Foley-Bott. She is with us in the studios at Talk Radio 77 WABC. Let's continue on that line because most people have not gone to Bhutan. What gave you the courage? Well, let me back up. Have you been to Asia? Had you been to Asia before?
I don't travel.
Okay. So other than New York and Colorado, you decided this place is calling to me. What was it like, and what did you take away from it when you returned?
So I spent most of my time there in two areas. So basically, Bhutan is a kingdom run by a king, and the basis of their whole kingdom is gross national happiness. Mm-hmm. And their whole kingdom is based on, and we went to the government and we met with the different committees. And one thing that I really love about going to study abroad, because you get to really you get really into the country. So right. I met the king, I met with the government, so that was really neat. But what was really fascinating was I spent most of my time there. At 4:30 in the morning, I would get up and go to a farm and milk the cows and take care of the cows, and then I would leave the farm at 4:30. At 5:30, and I would go up. I would climb a mountain every morning and spend spend a couple hours every morning with 52 nuns.
And you climbed the mountain for what purpose?
Every day, just to spend
Just
time
because.
with these because of the nuns, and to sit and to meditate. And then I would go back, I would go to my classes, and then at the end of the day, I would climb the mountain again, and I'd sit with these nuns. Every free waking moment I had was either in the farm or with the nuns. That was really like. And when I walked in, and this woman walked into the woman that was running the nunnery walked in, and I looked over, and I just started to cry. And she looked at me, and she just started to cry. And I was like, there's my teacher. So I got to spend 5 months with this woman who ran this nunnery, and just the stories that I, and nuns from 8 years old up into maybe, like I was the oldest one there. There was a couple older nuns, but mainly their children and young women who came from horrific backgrounds, and I was able to learn a lot about life and humility, and through their Buddhist practice. And I did a thesis on their practice, and I got really close with a lot of these women, and I got really close with the dogs. I love the animals there too.
Either way, we were all each other's teachers, and when you were ready, your master appeared. Let's switch the focus. Then you return back to the United States. You must have taken with you every single day some lessons that you learned from Bhutan. You came back here, and now you're on a program to do something else. Yeah. Talk to us about this next point of your evolution and transformation.
So, I left 3 kids behind when I left. So my youngest son was a senior in high school when I got in that car and drove to Bhutan, drove to Colorado and went to Bhutan. All 4 kids were in college at the same time at that point. But my kids wanted me home. I mean, it was really nice to be away to do what I had to do, and I probably would have stayed in Colorado to go for my master's. But I graduated. And after I graduated, everybody flew out to see me graduate, which was wonderful. I'm old, as you know, and I'm not the traditional student, and I needed to find a program that I could get out in the world and service, start a private practice, be able to help others. So I applied to various schools on the East Coast, and I decided to pursue a career in social work so I could have the credentials I could to open a practice and to
It seems a rather obvious question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Why social work?
Okay, so I truly wanted to go mental health and stay out there and do that, but because of the credentials for the degrees, especially in New York, a social worker degree carries so much more clout than a mental health degree. Mental health degrees are a little, they're not as, you can't collect. I shouldn't say you can't. It's harder to collect insurance. You don't diagnose. It's more limited. And I'm just telling you, I've done some research around it, and when I really wanted to do a dual degree with divinity, as I've shared all along, my passion is to carry this word about this power that's just saved my life, and it's so important. I was reading the social worker guidelines, and it's all about, it's almost like a mental health degree and divinity combined in one, because it truly, the sense of social workers truly is to help others. I mean, that's the basis of what it's all about. And that's really the foundation of my life today.
Right, and you go to work every day in the service of someone's health,
I do.
In the service of someone's success, in the service of their own transformations. Wow, that is fantastic. When you look toward the future and you think about all of these events that have led you to this place, what do you tell people that you come in contact with, in addition to this radio station, if they were in the similar place that you were? What advice would you give them?
Well, the most important thing that I learned was that the universe has your back, and the universe knows what you need. You need nothing other than what you have. Materialism, society, everything I learned, I needed to unlearn, and I really needed to focus mainly on the inside, internally, meaning meditation and getting to know who I am. And once I know who I am, then I'm able to offer something to somebody else. I can't offer anything to others unless I know who I am.
But how do you know that? To our listeners, it may sound abstract. Help bring some clarity to, how do I know who I am?
So first of all, developing a practice, so in order to know who you are, you have to know who you're not. So I needed to kind of know who I wasn't. My roles of a mother, of a wife, of a student, those are just roles. That's not who I am. Deep down inside of me, I am somebody yearning to fulfill a purpose on this planet, and life is here to be lived. So if I was to say, how do I do that? I need to set aside. So the work that I do is like my resentments, my fears, my harms. I literally do work like self-examination, and I need to face those fears to see what's true and what's false. Most of what I believe and what my mind is telling me is not real and it's not true. So how do I distinguish true from false? It comes down to doing the work. In AA, I'm very active in AA, and I like to say that the framework of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, as far as a daily inventory, prayer, meditation, for me is skills that everybody can learn, and their alignment with the skills that I learned in Naropa, their alignment with the skills I learned in church. So a lot of these things that I'm talking about are accessible to people, but they're not accessible to what society teaches us. In school, they don't teach us to think of the other. They think of learning science and math. Not that all those things are important, but what's most important is to love thy neighbor as thyself. To literally to know that like to do something for somebody and don't tell anybody. Like just small little gestures. Just show up every day and ask, how can I serve? The world is full of self-centered, and we're just thinking of ourselves, me. We live in these little boxes, when really, like, we're all here just yearning for the same thing: community, unity, and love. And that's really what I found along the way. And when I give that to someone else, I get it back 100-fold.
A lot of religions talk about that as part of their doctrine, but it sounds like, even though you've talked about Buddhism, there's not a religious orientation here?
No.
What is this?
No, it's something that every person is yearning for. We're all
even if someone doesn't know it.
We're not. We're human beings. We're spiritual beings in a human body, seeking something so much deeper and richer than the materialism that the world is selling us. The world is selling us a bill of goods that is just, in my experience and what I felt, and when, I could, if I look at a sunset, there's a feeling I get when I could help another alcoholic recover because I share my experience. I could see something in their eyes that a light turns on. That's not like maybe driving a fancy car. That's not like the materialism. Don't get me wrong, materialism is great, but there's a lot of books that I've read in reference to the Buddhism that talks about spiritual materialism. Even religious leaders like being very pious, if that's the word, righteous might be more of the word. It's in the humility of shrinking to oneself. It's in shrinking to oneself where you could find oneself.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly profound. I've not been in recovery, but where I take a lot of wisdom, and particularly where I spend my time in the service of others, often that phrase, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can.
I cannot change.
I cannot, right. Can you recite that? Let's see, so I didn't muddle it. What is the prayer?
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Do you carry that with you all the time?
All the time.
All the time.
Throughout my day, I get on my knees, I ask for the next right action, the next right direction, and I try to stay small, quiet, and humble. The more that I get involved, even if I have the right answers and I know what's best for somebody, is it my place to tell that? Or maybe they need to find that on their own. I'm not God. God dwells within me and will use me, but not from here. He'll use me in ways that I can't imagine. God puts me in certain places, puts certain movies in front of me, or songs on the radio, or people in front of me. Like, the universe is always telling me the next right thing. I don't need to go out and seek anything. It's going to come right to me. I'm a firm believer in alchemy. gold doesn't just turn gold. It's metal first. So we need to start and just show up. And then later on, in hindsight, is 2020. You know, you could play Monday morning quarterback and see what you did yesterday. But you're not going to be able to do that unless you actually trust. So if you were to ask me, my greatest, it's not faith, it's not a belief, it's my experience. My experience in my life shows me that if I just show up for life and trust the next right action, whatever that is, and it's not necessarily a thought, it's a feeling, and I'm not saying a feeling of emotion, it's a deep feeling within me, so deep that I just know this is what I need to do. Words are limited. It says preach the gospel and use words only when necessary. So like I've cultivated that through prayer, meditation, self-examination, and through just everything I do on a daily basis. I can't think my way into recovery. I need to act my way into living. You know.
In the time that we have remaining, we always ask ourselves, the question is, if you've heard us before, what do we want our listeners to think? What do we want them to feel? And what do we want them to do when Barbara stops this interview? So let's enlighten our listeners. What do you want them to feel about their lives?
That they're enough, and that you have everything you need. There's nothing that you need that you don't already have. Nothing.
What do you want them to think about their lives?
Don't think.
Right.
Thinking is overrated.
And the most important part, this is in the execution of our own transformations, of what actually has to get done in order to find ourselves. What do you want the listeners to do?
Take a risk, and don't sell yourself short. Just stay, and go. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's always a paradox and
Yeah.
contradiction, but what you're saying is trust your instincts. That's why we have them, which makes us human. Keep moving. All those things that you've said are fantastic, because I feel sometimes we live in a world where even our college students, they're striving for perfection, and they're so disappointed when they don't have it. And I suspect everything you're talking about is let that be. Strive for progress. Yeah.
Follow your heart. I mean, it really comes down to just following your heart.
Yeah.
You know what you need. Everything you have inside of you, you know. You already know.
And
nobody needs to tell you. We look for outside validation, and you don't know what I need. Only I know what I need.
Right. And often what you need is right in front of you.
It is.
We talk about that on the mountains of transformation.
Yeah.
So often the mountains, they're right in front of us.
Yeah.
You just got to take a step.
Yeah.
And yeah. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Barbara, it has been such a pleasure. You have listened to Barbara Lee Foley-Bott, our guest on A Climb to the Top, Stories of Transformation. Thank you so much for coming into the studios of Talk Radio 77. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you, Chuck. Thank you very much.